If you don't have a Bible this morning, we want to offer one to you. The ushers are going to come forward. We're going to be teaching out of the book of Mark. Surprise. But we're going to be in Mark 14 again today. So just raise your hand. The ushers will come by. They'll give you a Bible. That can be yours to use today, but also that's just yours. Take it and use it. Let it be a blessing to you. If we haven't met yet, my name is Cory, Engel. I actually live in Great Falls, Montana. I've had the pleasure to come out here. I'm guessing I might be up to 10 times or so coming out here to speak over the last little bit. It has been a tremendous pleasure for me to be with you. Everybody's like, "Oh, yeah, we're so thankful for you coming out here." Well, I just want to say thank you to you because I was a lead pastor for 20 years in Great Falls, a little over 20 years, and stepped down to serve churches. So now I oversee a network of churches, and so that's my job. But I miss the local church and being able to come and serve people and build relationships, and that just is important to me. And it's been a tremendous blessing to just be a part of your church over the last little bit. So thank you. Thanks for letting me be a part of it. I want to show you a picture. Now, don't be shocked, but this is a picture from a long time ago. When I actually shared the picture with the people in the sound booth, they started making fun of me right away. This was a picture of me with hair. But this is actually a picture of my lovely bride, my wife, Tasha. And I'll be honest with you, God blessed me with an unbelievable partner in ministry. And I'm not just saying that because I know she's probably watching online somewhere in Montana, but it really is the truth. God has blessed me significantly with a wonderful partner. When we were engaged, I was planting a church. So I had been invited. I'd been praying about God using me in the Great Falls area, and I'd met this gal, and we started kind of dating, and then we got engaged. And right after that engagement, we launched a church. So here I am, pastor of a brand new church. We're just trying to get started, engaged to be married. And guys, I was broke, so broke. I had spent basically all of my money to purchase an engagement ring for my wife because I wanted to give her the best that I possibly could. But then as we were getting ready for our wedding, we started talking about the honeymoon. And I remember going, man, how are we going to pay for a honeymoon? We're barely making ends meet, or I'm barely making ends. I was getting $500 a month from the church. So and I was working kind of at a side job at a bank, making $7 an hour. And my kids laugh at me every time I tell them that, because anytime they go look for jobs, it's like $15 an hour. And they can't imagine that there used to be jobs that paid $7 an hour. And I'm just like, well, just wait 20 years and you're going to think that $15 an hour is like that. Like, we all know that. So here I am, I'm scraping to make ends meet. But we decided to go to a travel agent to get kind of an idea of what a honeymoon could possibly be and what might fit inside of a budget of $0. And I remember we sat down. I didn't really talk much to my wife about just as a fiance at that time, but how much money I didn't have. That wasn't something I was bragging about. I wanted to keep her, right? So here we go to the travel agent. We sat down, and I remember the travel agent looking at my wife and said, "Okay, what are you thinking about, like location? Like, like Europe, kind of, you got kind of Asia, you could, Caribbean. What are you thinking?" And my wife said 3 words. She said, "hot, sun, beach." And all I heard was cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. Wow, this is going to be expensive. I know it's going to be expensive. So here I am. I'm sitting there. I'm gearing up for it. And the lady said, well, give me a day or two, and I'll put a little package together, and I'll send it to you about, what some options are, places where you could go. She said, if you really want something, maybe a really great place to go right now is Mexico, because it's got some really great options, but it's pretty economical. And I was like, well, at least that's somewhat good news. So 2 days later, I think I got this little packet from the travel agent, and it had the total price, which was way outside of the bounds. But I wanted to bless my wife. I wanted to invest in this future relationship. And so I went to the bank that I worked at, and I sat down with the loan officer, and I said, how hard would it be to be able to get a loan so that I could go on my honeymoon with my wife? Now, let's just put this into context. I'm a pastor of a church, and I am now, kind of, the Bible talks about, be cautious about going into debt and those kind of things. And I'm now going, I'm going to take out a loan to go on a honeymoon. And we're going to Mexico. And let me just tell you, when we got to Mexico, it was the most luxurious, extravagant place I had ever been to in my life by a large margin. I'm a pretty simple Montana boy. Going to a nice weekend away when you go to a camp out with no electricity and you're going to the bathroom out in the woods, right? That kind of stuff was like, that's fun for Montana people. So we went to this resort. It was all inclusive, and it ruined me, because if I'm ever going to go somewhere else, it's always got to be all inclusive, because man, that's awesome. Everything's provided for you. We pulled up. I remember being in this little shuttle that they got us to, and as we pulled in, there was like this little hillside, and it was the entire logo of the resort, all in different colored flowers. It was unbelievable. So here I am. I'm like, we haven't even got to the resort yet, and I'm already impressed with the amount of labor and work that it would take to make a logo out of grown flowers. It was amazing. So here I am. That's impressive. We pull around the corner, and now there's this giant kind of, almost, it's all outdoors. There was no walls, but it was like marble floors, perfectly clean. You look like you could eat off it, seriously. And then it was kind of a covered area. It was like being in like a jungle hut, so to speak. But man, it was like fancy. And they escorted us in. They took our baggage. They set us down in this little lobby. So they didn't even make you stand in line to check in. They'd actually bring you over to this little seating area, and then they'd call you over when they were ready. But until they were ready, they'd bring you like drinks and snacks and all kinds of stuff. While we were sitting there, we're like, holy cow, this is like service we've never experienced. So we're looking around, and we see like there's these birds, these beautiful peacocks walking all over the place. And then there's these giant floral arrangements that are just like twice as tall as me, and flowers all over the place. And they're all fresh cut flowers. And I'm like, holy cow, this is amazing. We got to our room, and we were like, this room is unbelievable. Everything was like marble. Our beds were perfectly made. Even what was amazing to me is all the washcloths were folded in these little origami shapes. And so we're there. That's us. And we got like the cheapest room. So this is us on our honeymoon in our room. And this is, my wife's probably embarrassed now. And they're like, oh man, I can't believe he's showing us these pictures. The food was overwhelming. We were blown away by the food. There were 2 gigantic buffets we could choose from when we got there. It was all inclusive. So it was all you can eat anytime you want. We'd show up at these buffets. You'd have people to serve you like crazy. If you didn't want the buffets, which was more food than you could possibly eat, you could go to 7 different restaurants. There was like a steakhouse, there was a teppanyaki restaurant, there was Italian, there's just all these different restaurants. If you wanted to go down to the beach and you were hungry, there was like a whole little restaurant down there on the beach, right off the beach. You could get any drink you wanted. They'd serve you right there on the beach. People coming down the way, just getting you stuff you wanted. We never had felt like royalty before, but I couldn't imagine being treated more royally. We were overwhelmed at the extravagance of it all. So much so that when I got back, I was almost embarrassed to talk to people about it. Because you know how people are at church sometimes, especially with a pastor. We were an up-and-coming church. So it would have been very easy for people to go, "You went where? How much are we paying you?" Right? There was this kind of level of like a pastor would go and live that kind of life of luxury for an entire week and kind of live at that level of abundance and extravagance. It would have been very easy for people to question, right? You went into debt to do this? You took out a loan? You know what the Bible says about going into debt? Now, again, I am not advocating at all to do what I did. Okay? But I could have been accused of kind of doing the wrong thing. Many could have said, well, you could have put that money down on a house. You need to buy a house, right? At that time, we were hoping to buy a house, but we weren't in a financial position to do so. So many people could be like, what a foolish decision. You could have taken that money, put it down, and you could have had a good start on a down payment on a house. Or you could have put that money into an investment, and you could have begun to invest it more wisely. You could have paid off your school loan, which I still was paying on from just having graduated from college. Or others could have said, well, do you know what kind of ministry you could have done with that money? You could have done a lot of good stuff. We're an up-and-coming church. A lot of people could have questioned the decision. So the question then is, was it worth it? Was it worth it? I'm not going to do a poll. But the answer to that question actually is somewhat simple, but it actually is also somewhat complex. Because the answer to that question kind of depends on your value of Tasha, my wife. How much is she worth? You see, as a groom about to be husband, I loved her. And I was willing to give my life for her. And I knew that God was calling me to honor her and to treat her the way I wanted to be treated. And to sacrifice for her. And sometimes do some things that are costly, maybe a little risky, to honor her. For me, was it worth it? Yeah. I'd do it again in a moment because she's worth it to me. She's worth it to me. Now, I say all of that because we're going to take a look at the same passage we took a look at last week. Now, last week we talked about how not to lose your grip, and we focused on Judas and how, in the context of this story, Judas loses his grip, kind of spirals off the deep end, loses control, and finds himself doing things that he would never have thought he would have done. But today we're going to take a look at this passage, same passage, but we're going to take a look at it from the aspect of Simon the leper and Mary, the sister of Lazarus. So let's take a look at it. Mark chapter 14, verses 1 through 11. If you were here last week, this is just kind of a little recap of what we talked about, but let's read together. All right, verse 1. It was now 2 days before the Passover and the festival of unleavened bread. The leading priests and the teachers of religious law were still looking for an opportunity to capture Jesus secretly and kill him. But not during the Passover celebration, they agreed, or the people may riot. Meanwhile, Jesus was in Bethany at the home of Simon, a man who had previously had leprosy. In other parts of the scripture, other translations, people have come to know this guy as Simon the leper. Simon the leper, okay? While he was eating, this is Jesus, a woman, now we know this from the Gospel of John and others, that this is Mary, the sister of Martha and Lazarus, who live in Bethany. Mary came in with a beautiful alabaster jar of expensive perfume made from the essence of nard. She broke open the jar and poured the perfume on Jesus' head. Verse 4, some of those at the table, now we know in this story, when we take a look at these other gospel accounts, we know that the sum of those includes Judas. But it wasn't just Judas. There were others in the crowd that had this same kind of feeling that this was a little bit more extravagant than it should be. And so here's what they said. They said, why waste such expensive perfume? In verse 5, they said it could have been sold for a year's wages and the money given to the poor. So they scolded her harshly. They rebuked her for doing this act. But Jesus comes to her defense and he says, leave her alone. Why criticize her for doing such a good thing to me? You will always have the poor among you, and you can help them whenever you want to, but you will not always have me. She has done what she could and has anointed my body for burial ahead of time. I tell you the truth. Wherever the good news is preached throughout the entire world, this woman's deed will be remembered and discussed, which we're doing again today for the second week in a row, right? Then, remember from last week, because of all that stuff, Judas then goes, one of the 12 disciples went to the leading priests to arrange to betray Jesus to them. And they were delighted when they heard why he had come, and they promised to give him money, so that he began to look for an opportunity to betray Jesus. All right, well, let's talk. I'm going to talk through 4 things. Number 1 is the context. Number 2 is the characters. Number 3 is the action. And number 4 is the crux. And I'll kind of explain the crux part when we get there. So the context. Context is pretty straightforward, right? It's Passover week. Many Jews would have been traveling on their way to Jerusalem because several times during the year, the Jews were required to go to Jerusalem to be able to offer sacrifices and celebrate the feasts of Israel. And so they were on their way, many of them, and probably Jesus and his disciples were also a part of this group that was traveling on their way to Jerusalem in preparation for the Passover week. Bethany is where they're at. They're the town of Bethany, which is 2 miles outside of the Mount of Olives. So if you've got Jerusalem, and then Mount of Olives is kind of on the kind of the edge there. 2 miles outside of that is Bethany. Now, Bethany was known for its hospitality, for its generosity to pilgrims that were traveling to Jerusalem, because twice a year they're all traveling, or maybe it's 3 times a year, they're all traveling to get to Jerusalem in order to celebrate these feasts. So, as pilgrims were coming, Bethany became known as a place that was very gracious and accommodating to those who were traveling. So, Jesus and his disciples stop at the home of Simon the leper for a special little party thrown in Jesus' honor. All right? So that's the context. So we probably got not just Jesus and his disciples, but probably lots of maybe disciples that are there. But they're all there being hosted by Simon the leper, big party thrown in his honor, in Jesus' honor. Let's talk about the characters. The characters. Well, one of the first ones we could say is Simon the leper. Now, Simon the leper often gets overlooked in this story, honestly. But Simon the leper here is obviously someone who had experienced Jesus in a radically transformed way. If you were a person who had been classified as you had leprosy, you were cast out of society. You had to often live in what was called a leper colony, or you'd have to live in entire seclusion from others because nobody wanted to catch this incredibly contagious disease. And if you got it, it was like a painful death sentence. You would be alone for the rest of your life. You would basically experience all kinds of debilitation, like slow destruction of your flesh where your fingers would fall off and you'd be deformed. These sores and stuff would cover your whole body. It was tremendously painful. And so people who were lepers were desperate to be healed. Jesus, at some point, we don't know when, encounters Simon who has leprosy. And Jesus transforms this guy's life to which leprosy is no longer an issue he's got to navigate. He heals him. And now, can you imagine what it would be like to be someone who is ostracized from your family, can't hold your wife, can't hold your kids, can't have a job, can't take care of yourself, forced to live outside of town because you can't be around anybody because of your disease, and then you encounter Jesus, and then suddenly your life is radically changed. And now, what do we know? Context here is that Simon's now back home. He's now at the home of Simon the leper. He's probably restored to his family. So his wife and maybe his kids are all now there. He can have a life again. And that debilitating disease that had destroyed him now has been totally healed by Jesus and his power. Do you think Simon has a little bit of gratitude and thankfulness to Jesus for his work? Do you think Simon thinks that Jesus is probably worth throwing a little party for him? And if it's a little bit like when people, they really appreciate something you do and they'll say things like, hey, if you're ever in town, come by my place. Because why? Because they just want to honor you again. They want to say thank you again. They're appreciative of your work. So Simon the leper here probably is like, hey, Jesus, if you're ever coming through Bethany, and I know you're probably coming for the Passover, you're probably coming for the feast, anytime you come to my house. You come to my house. And so when Simon hears that Jesus is near, he goes all out, throws a big party, starts to gather his friends, and hey, Jesus is coming over. His disciples are coming over. All because he wants to now honor Jesus because of what Jesus has done for him. The second character is Mary. Mary, we know, is the sister of Martha and Lazarus. Now, we know quite a bit about Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. One of the important arenas is that Mary and Martha sent a word to Jesus when their brother Lazarus got sick. And Jesus was about a couple days away, and they were like, hey, Jesus, come, because Lazarus is sick. If you come, you can heal him. We actually talked about this, I think, a long time ago. But Mary and Martha watched their brother die. And then they watched him put into a tomb, and a stone rolled over to basically protect them from the smell of decay. And 4 days after his death, Jesus walks into their world. And they go to Jesus. Remember this? They go to Jesus and they say, man, if you just would have been here, you could have saved him. But Jesus basically kind of walks over and says, roll the stone away. Let's see what we can do. And he raises Lazarus from the dead. Can you imagine how life-altering that would be for Mary? How radically changing that would be to have Jesus now suddenly show up, and in the place of your greatest grief and your sorrow and your fear, suddenly he brings life and wholeness and healing. You can imagine how much gratitude Mary would have had for Jesus. How much thankfulness for Jesus. How much she would have loved to honor Jesus. So we have Simon the leper. We have Mary. Then we have Jesus, right? Let's not forget Jesus. He's a key character in this. Because why? Because he's the object of honor. He's the one that the party's being thrown for. He's the one that the crowd is gathered for. And he's the one in which Mary comes to anoint. He's the object. And lastly, we have Judas. We have Judas. Judas wasn't just the only one, but he was very critical of this act. He was in the crowd. I'm sure he was eating the food. He was being a part of the party. He was enjoying all the hospitality and the accommodations. But when he sees this act of extravagance shown to Jesus, he has a fit. Internally, he trips it. And he jumps up, and he then becomes critical of the act. Simon the leper, Mary, Jesus, and Judas. So what happens? Now we're to the action. We've got our context, we've got our characters, now the action. So we've talked a little bit about this, but the action is Jesus is coming through Bethany, and Simon finds out about it, Simon the leper, and he throws a huge party in Jesus' honor. Now, think about this. How many of you guys have thrown a big party for a bunch of people before? Right? You have a bunch of people over to your house. Maybe it's a big barbecue. Just a few years ago, my son graduated, so we had a big graduation party. Just last night, my wife told me that our neighbors right behind us, they got married. And they got married at their house. And they had a huge party all night long. So Tasha's like, yeah, we were part of it even though we weren't there. But people everywhere, right? People all over. All these guests have come, right, to celebrate that couple. Right? We know what it's like to throw a big party. Here's what I know, and I know I'm talking a lot about money here, but parties are expensive. They're costly. If you're going to invite somebody over, lots of people, it just, the price tag goes up quickly. So if Simon here is inviting now the community, and he's inviting Jesus, and he's inviting the disciples, the price tag on this has got to be pretty high. This is a costly venture. It's not cheap. It would be a lot cheaper if we just would have been like, how about, Jesus, you just stay out there and we'll all do like picnic lunch. And we'll just all bring our own stuff. But that wouldn't have honored Jesus, would it? Simon realized, look, this is an opportunity for me to give what I have. The phrase that Jesus uses to Mary, to defend Mary, is that she gave what she could. She gave what she could. Well, so does Simon. Simon gives what he could. He has a house. He has maybe some resources. So I'm going to give what I can to honor Jesus, even though it's costly. Not only is it costly, but it's also inconvenient. Have you ever had a party? Have you ever brought people over, right? All of a sudden you got people all over your house. They're going through your cupboards. They're in your bathrooms and bedrooms and all there's nowhere to escape. As an introvert, I'm usually like, where can I go, right? It's inconvenient. You got to realter and reorient your life to be able to throw a party. And yet somehow Simon looked at this and went, hey, we want to do this because Jesus is worth it. Not only is it costly, not only is it inconvenient, but it's a little risky. Because what do we know? In verse 1 and 2, it says that the disciples or not the disciples, but the Pharisees are trying to find a way to capture Jesus and put him to death. We know this heightened tension because the moment Jesus is arrested, what happens to all the disciples? They all run for their lives so that they're not caught up in it because they were fearful of being put to death. So honoring Jesus like this, opening your home to Jesus, having his disciples in, that puts you kind of on the hit list, so to speak. It's a little risky. And yet Simon the leper said what? Jesus is worth it. I want to stop for a moment as we start talking about this. There's a word we use in church that we often kind of blow past and we forget what it actually means. It's the word worthy. Worthy. In fact, I think we sang it a couple times in the songs today about Jesus being worthy. Last week, at the end of the message, there was a song, "You Are Worthy of It All." What does that word worthy mean? Well, in a very simple way, it just means he's worth it. Worthy means worth it. So when it says that Jesus is worthy of it all, it means that Jesus is worth it all. And Simon looks at Jesus and sees what Jesus has done for him, and he says, look, if I've got to spend all my money for this party, if I've got to be inconvenienced for this, reorient my life for this party, even if it puts my life in jeopardy, it's a little risky. He's worth it. He's worthy of anything I could give him. In the middle of this party now that Simon now is extravagantly poured out on behalf of Jesus, Mary shows up. Now, we don't know if Mary was invited. We're kind of assuming maybe that she was. But out of nowhere, in the middle of this whole thing, Mary decides she's going to jump up and pour oil on Jesus' head. Now, what do we know about this oil? It was unbelievably costly. It was expensive. Chances are it was something that had been handed down maybe from generations, almost like an inheritance or something of value. It could have been, something that was preserved for her, maybe in terms of a preparation for marriage. We don't know exactly how she came about this, but this was something certainly unbelievably valuable. And everybody in the room, the moment it happened, went, "Holy cow, that's expensive. That's extravagant." It was costly what she gave. Not only that, it was sacrificial. It was sacrificial. Because once it was poured on Jesus, there's no getting it back. Right? There's no being able to use it a second time. There's no saving just a little bit for me. She gave it all. And not only that, it was also a little risky. Can you imagine what it would be like if, so this big service is going on. You got all these people here in the middle of the service. Everybody's focused on Jesus, maybe some of the things he's teaching and those kind of things. And then all of a sudden a lady jumps up and says, "I'm going to interrupt stuff because I have something really important I need to do." And all kinds of criticism. We know the criticism that came to her the moment she did it, right? It caused people to be upset. It caused people to wrinkle their nose. It caused people to start mumbling behind themselves. I can't believe they're doing this. I can't believe she's saying this. Look at it, all of the little rumbling started to happen. It was risky for her reputation that she would approach Jesus in this way as a woman in that society. It was a risk for her to do this. And yet, Jesus was worth it for her. And then you have Judas. So the moment this, in the midst of this extravagant party for Jesus, now all of a sudden this woman comes and does something extravagant, pouring out this expensive perfume on Jesus' head. He looks at it and he sits in disgust. Have you ever seen someone who's got the disgust face on? I remember the very first service I ever did. We had just launched our church. And we wanted our church in Great Falls, we wanted it to be a place where anybody could come. You didn't have to dress up. You didn't have to wear anything special. And so I intentionally wore blue jeans my very first Sunday. So I wore blue jeans. And so we're there, and we're inviting people to come. And there was an individual that kind of sat, I remember, we had a tiny little stage, and so people sat, right over here. And a guy in a full suit, tie, and he kind of sat through the first service like this. And he just gave me kind of this disgust look. After the little worship, we did a little tiny break where we'd break and just meet each other. And so I decided I'm going to go meet that guy. And I'm just going to go be kind to him and see if I can't kind of ease him and make him feel a little more comfortable in our church. And I ran over to him and I shook his hand. I offered my hand. And I said, hey, I'm Cory. And I'm the lead pastor here. And all of a sudden his eyes shot up at me. Because I'd been singing, but I don't think he knew that I was the lead pastor. So he looks at me. Then he looks down at my jeans. Then he looks back at me with this huge face of disgust. And he said, "Where did you go to seminary?" That's the attitude I think Judas is sitting here with. I can't believe this. What a waste. How unrighteous. He is looking for reasons, Judas here is looking for reasons to be, all burnt up about this and angry. And then he can't hold it back any longer, and he rebukes her. He condemns her in front of everyone. We talked about this last week, so we won't talk more about it. But Judas here is virtue signaling, trying to help everyone think he's the righteous one by condemning someone that he sees as an easy target. But Jesus here then turns the tables, doesn't he? He turns the tables. And he stands up for Mary. And he says, leave her alone. Leave her alone. Because she has done something beautiful to me. She has done something beautiful. What Mary did, it might look extravagant. It might look like it's over the top. It might not look like it's valuable to you, but it's worth it to her, and it matters to me. And he said, in fact, this is so beautiful that wherever the gospel is preached, this is going to be a part of it. This act of worship, this act of selfless giving. People are going to talk about this for generations and generations and generations because of the worthy act of worship that it is. That's the action. So we have the context, we have the characters, we have the action. Now let's talk about the crux. the crux. In Montana, there's lots of places where you can go rock climbing. And if you're a rock climber, you'll know that on any climb, there's a point called the crux of the climb. It's the hardest part. So as you're climbing, right, you often will get to a place where this is easy, this is easy, this is easy, and then all of a sudden it's, okay, this is hard. This is where I could easily lose my grip. This is where, if I don't navigate this properly, I can slip off, or I'll have to turn back, or I'll have to jump off. The crux is the hardest part of any climb. It's where a climber will determine whether they succeed or fail. And I think it's right at this moment that Judas loses his grip. Right? He didn't see Jesus as worthy. Up until this point, I think Judas hung around Jesus because he just saw what he could personally get from Jesus. What Jesus can give to me. What he can do for me. If I ever get sick, maybe Jesus can heal me. He had a position of prominence in the disciples' team, so he could kind of steal some money. So maybe it was a little bit of, I don't want to give up that position. I don't want to give up this cushy job. I don't want to give up this pathway to be able to sneak off the top. Judas was following Jesus because of what Jesus could do for him. Not because of who Jesus is. And this is where I think many people lose their grip. Honestly, when I came to Jesus, I came to him because I needed him to help me out of a real mess in my life. I needed him to heal me and restore me and to save me. But even if Jesus wouldn't have done any of those things, would that change the fact that Jesus is worthy? Would that change the fact that Jesus is worth it for me to give my life? Guys, Jesus isn't just some genie that we put on the shelf and we can pull him off when we need him to, and we give him a little rub and he pops out and then does the things we want him to. That's how we often treat Jesus, like he's like the magical genie that makes our life all better. But guys, even if Jesus doesn't fix everything for you, it doesn't change the fact that Jesus is worthy of it all. Because he's worthy. Because of who he is. I wanted to close this service with a little music video. A song that every time I hear it, I weep. But, so I sent it to the team and said, hey, can we close with this song? Show this little video. But because it's from YouTube and because we stream the services, if we did, we'd get shut down and all the liability things. And so we can't show the video. But here's what I want to do. I want to read the lyrics of this song. I want to read the lyrics of this song. It's a song called, Is He Worthy? Is He worthy? Now, there's a part for you as a congregation to say, and there's a part, it's in response to my reading. So for this first time, your response is, we do. Okay? All you have to do when I point to you is just say, we do. On the second part, and I'll clue you in on this, when I point to you, all you have to say is, it is. It is. And then on the third part, when I point to you, all you have to say is, he does. Okay? So, we do, it is, he does. You'll know when to, so there's 4 we do's, 4 it is. Okay, we got it? So here's the lyrics. Do you feel the world is broken? Do you feel the shadows deepen? But do you know that all the dark won't stop the light from getting through? We do. Do you wish that you could see it all made new? We do. Is all creation groaning? It is. Is a new creation coming? It is. Is the glory of the Lord to be the light within our midst? It is. Is it good that we remind ourselves of this? It is. The chorus says this: is anyone worthy? Is anyone whole? Is anyone able to break the seal and open the scroll? The Lion of Judah who conquered the grave. He was David's root and the Lamb who died to ransom the slave. Is he worthy? Is he worthy of all blessing and honor and glory? Is he worthy of this? He is. Finally, does the Father truly love us? He does. Does the Spirit move among us? He does. And does Jesus, our Messiah, hold forever those he loves? He does. Does our God intend to dwell again with us? He does. Is anyone worthy? Is anyone whole? Is anyone able to break the seal and open the scroll? The Lion of Judah who conquered the grave. He is David's root and the Lamb who died to ransom the slave. From every people and tribe, every nation and tongue, he has made us a kingdom and priests to God to reign with his Son. Is he worthy? Is he worthy of all blessing and glory and honor? Is he worthy? Is he worthy? Is he worthy of this? He is. Guys, Jesus is worthy. No matter what people think, no matter how extravagant your giving to him might be, he's worthy of it all. It might be costly. It might be inconvenient. It might be sacrificial. It might even be a little risky. I remember the first time I raised my hand in worship and I was afraid of what people might think, right? Cory's going off the deep end. He's going to be a Jesus freak. Maybe. But guess what? He's worthy, amen? He's worthy. So, Father, we come to you as a church declaring that you alone are worthy. You alone are the one who is worthy to open the scroll, and you alone are the one who is worthy to receive our worship and our praise. So we give it to you today. We exalt you, for you are the righteous and glorious King who is worthy of anything and everything we could give. And so we give to you today our lives. We surrender ourselves to you. We allow our lives to be a living offering, holy and pleasing unto you. For you alone are worthy. Amen.